Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our Woody Allen Retrospective right here on planettyro.com. I am your host, Donald Wonder, and I'm joined once again by my lovely co-host, the one, the only, Simon Rad.
Glad to be back, and it's a historic review today, where it's the end of an era.
Literally, I thought you was going to make a fun. You were kind of making a pun. You've been doing that recently, and I like them.
I wasn't trying to be much of a punster, but just being literal. I mean, what can I say? That's what this movie's best known for being an end of a Woody Allen era,
so to speak. Guys, before we start this podcast, I want to let you know, I've said this a few times in the last couple of recordings, I do want to speak about some of the feedback that you listeners have been giving us. And if you stay down to the end of the podcast, then we'll get to it. So after the review, if you want to hear the feedback we've got, or the things I got to say about what you guys have said, stay until the very end and we'll get into that. But let's carry on with our normal scheduled programming. If you missed our last recording, you missed another fan favorite comedy, 1972 Sleeper. And if you're on YouTube, you can see the picture on the screen and there'll be a YouTube card that will take you back to that video. A fan favorite you might not want to miss, but moving forward, we want to let the non-YouTube guys know, and you guys that are listening on the podcast through audio only, there's a link in the description. If this is your first time, all our previous recordings you can find in the playlist. I'll put a link to down. Same thing on YouTube. We're on Stitcher Radio, whether you're listening on Android or iOS, your favorite podcast app, you can find us. Just put in the hashtag WoodyAllenRetro and you'll find the recordings. You can do that even on Google. Just go to Google, put in hashtag WoodyAllenRetro. You can see it on the screen, or I'll leave a note down below. You'll find all the recordings. And as usual, guys, we give you this general warning. Although we do these movie reviews, we don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen these movies before. We would prefer you watch the movie in question first, then come and listen to our discussion, which is full of our thoughts, our opinions, our dissections. We spoil a lot. So guys, unless you've already seen the movie and you don't care about spoilers, go watch the movie, then come and check us out. But with all that out of the way, Simon, I do want to just reiterate what you said in the beginning. This movie that we're getting to now is kind of an end of an era, because Woody Allen has been on a streak of these whimsical slapstick comedy movies, and this is kind of the last one, not the last comedy, but this is the last comedy in this string of comedies that he started with. And with that said, Simon, give us the name of the year of the movie, and let's get on with it.
Okay, so today we're looking at 1975's Love and Death, which is kind of a satirical love letter to Russian literature from Woody Allen. It's set in Russia, and him and Diane Keaton star as cousins in the Napoleon era. It's not surprising that Woody Allen's character has deep feelings towards Diane Keaton, and throughout the film he's trying to win her over in a number of different historical scenarios while dealing with war and marriage. It's up to the viewer to decide which is worse, and ultimately a giant assassination plot against Napoleon himself.
Let me go first. Looking back on my memory, because again, this is this is probably the third time I've seen this movie. I haven't seen this movie since I rewatched it now for the last 10 years or so. I remember this movie being one of my favorites. Rewatching it now, I still like it a lot, but in the third act, and we'll get into details later, it kind of loses focus for me, especially with the Napoleon assassination. And I just felt like it would have been tighter if they kind of just stuck with the idea of, I like the whole Woody Allen, getting drafted into the army to fight Napoleon and all the whimsical stuff, while Diane Keaton on the other side is getting married off. And look, Diane Keaton, for me, steals this movie on the basis that Woody Allen has played the same character again and again. Diane Keaton gets a lot more screen time in this movie, and her character is so detached. I wouldn't even say she's selfish. She wants love, but she's so detached in so many of the comedic things that happen in this movie that, again, I think that Woody Allen giving her much more of a chance to shine really just makes you fall in love with her as an actress even more in this movie as well.
Oh man, this is gonna be a mirror review from us because we're pretty much on the same page. What's great about the film that Woody Allen at this point really matured as a director. You were geeking about the font in the previous film, like he almost perfected his signature opening style with the music and the text and the font, and as well as his pacing and dialogue and characters. And yeah, you can see it. If you watch these movies in a sequence, you can tell he really got better and he really found himself as a director by this point. So the beginning of the movie is great. With all the other films, the movies take time to lure you in and set the mood right, and that's when really the film gets into its element. Here, it's brilliant from the get-go. The dialogue is great. The chemistry is great. You know, Diane Keaton's there from the start. Woody Allen commented many times how Diane Keaton helped him realize how he wants to write women, how he learned to write female characters, and having her character be such a integral part of the film. It's really a two-man show.
Yeah.
You know, she's just as much of a protagonist as he is, and when they go their separate ways, they have their own individual storylines and keep colliding back with each other and getting into all sorts of different love triangles. And the banter between the two of them, just like in Sleeper, is the best part of the movie. They have great chemistry, deliver their lines great. The actual writing is very clever because, yeah, he does the same thing again. It's a fish out of water comedy where him and Diane Keaton are basically 70s New Yorkers in Napoleon-era Russia, and everybody else is a stereotype. So everybody else does typical Russian accents. They're the archetypes of the time, so that kind of contrast between a modern era Woody Allen talking about, like, is war necessary? You know, my doctor said that death is the worst prescription for me at the moment. I need to avoid death. That's why I can't go to war. Like, everybody else is so happy that something finally fucking happened, that Napoleon invaded, that they can go to fight, that they can't wait to get on the battlefield. Woody Allen's the only guy like, I'm really not keen. You guys have fun. I'll stay at home. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it could actually be set in modern day. Like the movie's written so well. And when I say modern day, I mean the 1970s. But the movie's written so well, it could have been centered around him going to Vietnam, really.
That's a good point.
So it's just very solid writing. The jokes are very fluid. I'm trying not to quote the movie too much, so not to spoil any of the lines, because I just think the dialogue's really good. And the comedic segments with him in the army and getting trained and drafted and all that stuff work really well, as well as Diane Keaton's marriage. But then to wrap it up, like you said, the ending's the same as the last movie. It's killed the big boss, the leader, the emperor, the Napoleon. It's just a goofy assassination plot, and that last half hour, it just feels like like it's regurgitating to what we saw in the last film, and it's not that clever. The dialogue drops. No, it's not that funny, and it feels long. So that's where the movie really lost me personally, and that's what keeps this from being one of the greats. It's a very entertaining film. It's good, but I don't know. That ending just really lost my attention.
Yeah, you said it, and let me just go back a little bit and let's get a little bit more to the minutiae. Now, the dialogue in this movie. In previous movies, Woody Allen has got a lot of lines. He's got a lot of lines he's practiced, in his stand-up, when he did it in real life, on his late night shows or whatever. But the difference between his lines, his one-liners in the other movies and this time, is the dialogue throughout this movie with its ridiculous focus on intellectual philosophy, upper-class sound and vocabulary, and just arguments over semantics between him and Diane Keaton. They'll talk about, oh yes, but the philosophy of this, and they go back and forth. It gets to a ridiculous point. It's on purpose, and it is hilarious, and they do that in blocks throughout the movie, and you would think it would get boring or get kind of lame, but the way they do it is so tongue-in-cheek and so over the top that there's one scene in particular which is so silly, like, I'm just jumping in randomly. There's a part with Woody Allen. I've never been so happy with Diane Keaton, but then I felt miserable. And then you just see there's a scene where he's hanging himself out of the blue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a tribute to Russian literature of how, in those novels, you turn a page and suddenly the protagonist is suicidal. Like they're super depressed. It's kind of like a joke on that.
And then right after that scene, it doesn't even show you, because he hangs himself. They don't show you how he cuts himself down, by the way, which is a funny little, a bad edit, a purposefully bad edit. They just show him writing a poem. And the poem he's writing is so stupid and so ridiculous sounding. It's not about, there's this whole thing about wheat as well. Wheat. It's a funny, another nod to the Russian literature, as you mentioned. But this poem he writes in general is just silly. It's retarded. It's dumb. It's just another homage to like the dialogue, the non-whimsicalness. Now, I will say, as a negative, but I would say negative against the movie. If you know Russian literature, you're gonna get these jokes. I don't at all. But I could see, especially in some of the directing and a lot of the things that they were doing physically, I could see it was a nod to the Russian literature. I had to actually research it. I wasn't that interested first time around, but this time I wanted to know a lot of the things. There's even a part of Woody Allen's going back and forth with, I don't know, one of his uncles, and they're actually naming a lot of these books that are Russian. I didn't know that, but again, Woody Allen was inspired to do that based on Russian literature, which again, I'm sure the Russians loved that. They loved that homage. Woody Allen, we'll talk about the director in a minute. Woody Allen went over there, not to Russia. I think he shot most of this in France. Is that right?
France and some Eastern European countries.
Yeah, and it's just a testament to show how big his budget was as well. I think this was actually the first time he left America to actually shoot his movie as well. And I might as well jump to the direction. The direction, I think, is good. It's okay. He does set piece stuff here like he's done before, but I think the most impressive thing he does directly is there's a big war scene which includes cannons and there's a lot of actors on the screen. It's shot really well, and I'm like, wow, he put a lot of money into this for a gag. I mean, in Bananas, he did the same thing, but here with all the costumes and all the gags, it's actually done on a higher level, and I think he did that really well on a whole. With the costume design, the set design, again going back to Sleeper, where he put a lot of money and focus into it, I think he did that really well. And surprisingly, his attention to detail to do that, the Russian war or a Russian war type thing, was impressive to me.
I think actually, I haven't read anything about this, so I can't confirm it. But no matter how the movie came about in pre-production, diverting it away from present day at the time, so maybe setting this in Vietnam or something like that, helped probably with these scenes, because it was cheaper to use like swords and old-fashioned cannons rather than tanks and a modern military setting. So I think setting it in Napoleon era Russia helped that they could do more with the battle scenes. They could have more explosions. Those elements work better for the budget and directing rather than having a big battle with tanks and airplanes and all that.
And on that battlefield scene, just obviously because I'm a black guy, always when I see a black character, I'm like, oh, there's a scene where Woody Allen's being drilled by this black sergeant.
Oh yeah. That's one of the most random jokes. Like in Russia, out of nowhere comes this black guy from Brooklyn, like, hey, you're nothing. You're peanuts.
Yeah, straight up, sir. It's really funny.
Give me 20.
It's on the nose. And again, whenever I see him into a black character in these movies, the way he does it is always for humor. It never seems like token. I always have to shout out Woody Allen for doing that. And I think it's really fun. This is one of our shorter discussions, because personally, there's not much more I can say. I think we said this off mic. This movie takes some of the best things from Bananas and Sleeper with some really good dialogue and infuses it in here, and his homage to Russian literature. But unfortunately, like we both said, that last third act, as soon as it hits at the 52, 53 minute mark, as soon as this Napoleon assassination thing comes in, it just wasn't funny. I mean, it might have been, we've seen this thing before, that's fine. I'm not even going to say that's the reason why it's not good. It just wasn't funny. The way he directed the jokes, there's the scene where him and Dan Keaton's trying to seduce Napoleon and Woody Allen trying to shoot him. It goes on for long. It wasn't really that funny to me. I like the very end, how Woody Allen ends up getting killed, which is really funny, and the whole thing with him and death. There's some really good jokes I'm going to highlight, especially with my line in the movie, which I'll get to in a minute. But that last act really just brought it down from a really great movie to just a really good comedy. So, still one of his best. And but that ending just let me down, especially rewatching it. I was surprised that, I don't remember the ending being so kind of meh, but that's my feelings on it. It's a good movie still overall, but it just ends on a more of a disappointing note. But I still like the way he dies and him dance with death at the end. But again, it's good. I don't want to hate this movie too much. It's really good. I just remember it being better. Is all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing, and I can definitely understand where he was as a director, that he wanted to do something different. Because this formula he had for these goofball comedies really start to get tiresome. I mean, that's what drags down the ending. That is the same trapping that he always used, especially when you compare it to Sleeper. It plays out quite similar, and it actually pushes the second theme of the movie, which is a fear of death, to the background. Because that's one of the central themes Woody Allen's character has, and makes the piece personal as well. That he talks about atheism, and then what does death mean for you if you don't believe in any kind of God or any kind of religion.
Yes, religion is a big part. Actually, thank you for mentioning religion is a massive point. And actually, even though it's comedic, some of the philosophical questions they have about religion is actually serious. They take it a bit seriously. And another reason why this is a fan favorite is because he injects a serious level of dialogue between his atheism in this movie, which I think, although they push it to a point where it becomes very comedic, it actually asks some really interesting questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I feel like the dialogue is very strong. And, him being so ahead of his time and raising all these questions, infusing that in his films, helps build character, helps make the piece more personal, helps make the dialogue more interesting, as well as, just, like you said, engaging the audience of really thinking about these things. And this is going to be a central theme throughout his later films. And you can tell that because of the age he was reaching while making this, even in real life, this was more the questions about, the end, death become more prevalent for him, just as somebody nearing 40 years old. So injecting that felt natural. It was interesting. It led to some good scenes, whether it be some artistic stuff he threw in there or some of the good dialogue. But then the goofball ending, that's basically just one big con, kind of diverted from that. And when it comes back at the end, it's just random, and it ultimately doesn't really resolve anything. They tried to give Napoleon a little bit more character than the leader from the previous film, Sleeper. Here they even have a subplot with like a double, and Napoleon has some screen time with some dialogue. Yeah, but like you said, you forgot about it because ultimately the character is not memorable for such a historical icon. Napoleon, everybody knows Napoleon. He's one of the most recognizable figures from human history, but they really didn't do much with him. The subplot with the double wasn't that interesting. And yeah, there's nothing compared to the first half of the film. It's no comparison. It just feels almost like a different movie. Yeah. So I'm ready to wrap it up on this one because I think at this point everybody knows what to expect. Everybody knows that they're in for a treat early on, but the ending won't be that strong.
Well, to my surprise, the audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb are higher than they were on Sleeper, which I don't know if this is like a critic movie. I don't know, man, because there's so much homage to Russian literature and its attention to detail is really cool. Just reading the reviews on IMDb and looking at the score on Rotten Tomatoes, they're even higher. This is in the 80s, the 100% on Rotten Tomatoes on IMDb, 80s, 90s. I'm like, wow, I mean, it's good, but I don't know, man. I thought Sleeper was a little bit better, but I don't know. It's just...
I think he's getting to the point at this stage where he can get away. He's established enough to get away with a lot of things. Like he does some dream sequences and some due to his character's fear of death or him, like having visions of having conversations with death, which again is a not classic Russian literature, but he does these dream sequences and these artistic bits that are straight from like a European art film, that would be otherwise criticized for being too vague and abstract and out there. But because he translates it to this comedy, he gets a bunch of bonus points from critics who are like, oh, this goes above and beyond. It's such masterfully crafted fine art. It's like a crying statue in the early morning skies of the first leaves of autumn while I just slip. I'm like, shut the fuck up, okay? Like, I get it. I get it. You were impressed. And don't get me wrong, those sequences are good. I'm just saying I can see why some critics would overhype it versus Sleeper that stays on point with the sci-fi setting. There's more artistic bit here
Yeah.
inserted, and because he learned from his previous movies to how to direct sequences better, they're not as random, they don't feel out of place, they integrate well, and they're choreographed and directed efficiently.
Yeah, well, that's what I love having you on, Simon, because you made that very clear, and now I can see the train of thought to why the masses, I still think it's the critics that love it more than anyone else though.
Yeah, sleeper. Yeah, I agree with you. Sleeper all the way for me as well.
Yeah.
I take Sleeper over this film.
Well, that leads me to my quote of the movie. And you know what? This quote of the movie actually is one of my favorite quotes in the Woody Allen retrospective period. I know that for a fact. And it's got to do with a running gag between Diane Keaton and Woody Allen. I'm going to set this one up a little bit. So after Woody Allen finally gets married to Diane Keaton, which she was kind of reluctant to. I mean, before they even get married, there's a scene where Woody Allen is in a dual gunfight. And then when Woody Allen comes back successfully, she's like, he survived. And they're getting married. She's dressed in black while they're getting married. It's like a funeral. And she's just in a daze like, I can't believe it. He didn't lost. So from that point on, Woody's always trying to have sex with her. There's even one bit where they're in bed. Woody Allen puts his arms around her and she says, not here. It's not the right place. It's so funny. But my quote of the movie again is Woody Allen and Diane Keaton in bed. And Woody Allen touches Diane Keaton's character. And she said, no, don't. Sex without love is an empty experience. And Woody goes, yes, but as far as empty experiences go, it's one of the best.
and he wasn't lying, you know.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just truth. Like, I just want to stand up in the end. It's like preach.
That's why I love it, because it's true.
Give him applause. Yeah,
obviously. And guys' perspective, ladies, guys, you know how we're empty when it comes to sex. You know that. Well, maybe I can only speak for myself, but I love that quote, and the delivery is great, and just that whole gag of him and Diane, that especially when they don't get along when they're first married, and she doesn't want anything to do with him, but then she warms up to him very quickly, which is kind of weird. But just that bit was one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. So
yeah, you want to get into? I know you want to tackle something. You want to get something off of your chest, right? Besides that cough.
Well, people won't hear the cough because I've edited that for the most part. But guys, actually, before we get into like I said, we got some podcast feedback. I do want to say this is one of the movies where there's so much attention to detail that I could not even fathom. I was more than happy to check out the Woody Allen Pages Watcher's Guide. I'm always promoting this book because it's so friggin' awesome. Guys, I'm not just saying it because I have to. I bought the book, and this movie in particular, the amount of content this fellow put into this book for this particular movie, the costume design, the actors, all the stuff. Look, guys, if you love Woody Allen, if you love these movies and you want to know the finer details, this ebook is cheap as hell. If you've got a Kindle, I highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the description. I want to thank the Woody Allen Pages. They always, even shouting us out on Twitter, which I really appreciate. So thank you to the team over there. And guys, that's it for this actual podcast for this movie. Let us know what your thoughts are on this movie in the comments down below. Let us know, do you like the movie? Do you disagree with us? What are your thoughts on it? We want to hear all that stuff. I just want to put it here that we're ending the podcast here for this movie, because now we're going to get into the podcast feedback. And I'm glad I did it on this one, because actually this is our shortest review of all the ones we did before, hitting around the 22-minute mark or what have you. So guys, thank you for all the feedback you've given us. If you're on YouTube, I know there's only a few people that have left comments on our YouTube videos, which is really awesome, but a lot of people like what we do. Now, we're more successful on our podcast. If you're listening to this through iTunes or what have you, I've been seeing people getting in more and more. People have been searching more. Maybe I'll put something on the screen so you can see our podcast. So, I'm not just making this up. We get more people listening on the podcast on every single release because people love podcasts. People like listening. And the feedback I want to say is, first of all, thank you guys on iTunes, Twitter, the Woody Allen hashtag. People generally love the podcast. Now, whenever you're doing something creatively, whether you're doing a podcast, a movie, an album, what have you, you're going to get feedback. You're going to get critical feedback. And I'm always open to it, guys. Nobody's perfect. You're not going to please everyone. But I have to say, Simon, man, in particular, I had one experience during this podcast, sharing it with a certain audience that was extremely negative, that I am very disappointed with. And I'm going to just call them out right now. On Facebook, there's a group called Woody Allen Movie Fans. There's a lot of groups, especially. Now, There's groups on Google Plus, there's groups on Twitter, there's other groups on Facebook. This is the only group that really gave us some negative feedback. Now, I'm all up for critical feedback, especially on how to improve yourself. But the feedback I got on this particular case was so entitled and so just, it was very upsetting in a way that I'm very disappointed with. And usually I wouldn't even bring this up, but I have to say, man, there was people that enjoyed the podcast, but the people that didn't would say stuff like this: "You wasted my time. I can't believe I wasted my time listening to this podcast. It was not funny. It wasn't interesting. I didn't learn anything. Who do you think you are?" And I found this hilarious because they acted like we owed them something. And whenever I get this kind of feedback, because it's happened before on different reviews we've done, my whole thing is, hey man, if you didn't like it, tell us what you didn't like and maybe we could work on it. Oh, you wasted my time. You know, what was this? I mean, I could have watched some movies. I'm like, this is the most entitled people I've ever heard of. We don't owe you anything. We're doing this for free. Guys, let me say this for the record. I really held back because at first I was like, I replied to those guys directly. I said, hey guys, you don't like it, I do apologize. But every time I just, just think about what you're doing next time. I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, for real. This is a free podcast. And I said to them, if you don't like it, don't listen. I don't owe you anything. But to get that kind of feedback, and the one thing I really like is that Woody Allen himself has touched upon this. At some point, I will find the sound clip because he said this. The thing about reviews and people giving their opinions is that you always get people that love it and you always get people that hate it. But people always try to bring you down, whether they like you or not. There's people that are just trolls. These people are not being critical. They're just telling me, you're wasting my time. We don't owe you anything, guys. We don't. And all I want to say is, if you don't enjoy the podcast, that's fine. But these people did not listen to the podcast. They listened to it, they didn't like it, and they decided to tell me how much they hated it. That's fine. If you don't like it, don't listen. If you've gotten this far and you've heard me even complain about it, you obviously like it to a point. But the one thing they didn't say is that it sounded bad. They didn't say anything aesthetically. They just didn't like it. So I was happy. I was actually happy with that. They didn't say, oh, you guys sounded shit, or you didn't. They just said that I was bored. If you're bored, that's fine. But we don't owe you anything. And you know what? If you don't like this Woody Allen podcast, make your own. Because, guys, I looked. There was no one else doing a Woody Allen podcast out there. And it's sad. Woody Allen deserves a lot more shine from the fans. You know, there's fan page, but it's not an audio podcast. In this day of, people, if you go on YouTube, you'll see people doing a retrospective of Rodriguez, Spielberg, your favorite director. What's the Batman director? I can't remember his name right now.
Christopher Nolan.
Yes, Christopher Nolan. There's so many people that are dedicated, but Woody Allen, he does a movie every year for 50 years. He doesn't get no love. And then when someone's doing something, you're just going to shit on it without constructive criticism. That is really disappointing, guys. So I stopped sharing the podcast on there because it was a distraction. I just thought, you know what, if you're going to hate and you're going to just fill my head with negativity, I'm not going to share it on there anymore. Some people did say, hey, don't forget about those guys. But the negativity was completely just ridiculous and just really unjustified. It wasn't critical. It wasn't helpful. It was just entitled. And I really just didn't like that. And apart from that, guys, I don't want to focus on the negative. The majority, the 80% of the feedback has been really good. But honestly, I'm gonna just tell you guys up front what people are saying on the plus side and what they're gonna say on the negative side. So, guys, let us know what you think either way. But I'm just gonna say this for the record. We don't owe you anything. We really don't. We're doing this for free because we're fans. We take time out of our lives to do this. If you have critical or constructive criticism, that's fine. If you're just saying that, oh, you wasted my time and how dare you, or we didn't learn anything. These are the kind of people I really can't fucking stand, But that's all. That's my little rant over. I just wanted to say that. So I'll let Simon speak on this because I don't even think you knew. I didn't even get into too much details with you about the feedback I got there.
Huh? Oh, I actually, while you're doing your mini rant, I went out to get a sandwich. So yeah, I'm glad you got that little therapy session out of the way and you got it off your chest. For me, allow me to break character and get real for a bit. I don't care. I don't care about you or your opinion. But I'll end it with a little message. because I know where this is coming from. Like, oh, there are these people out there who consider themselves, oh, I'm a Woody Allen buff, I'm a film buff, I got all this information. Look, the jig is up, okay? We live in the internet age. You ain't smart, you ain't special, you ain't educated. What you do, you go to the internet, you Google stuff. You got a Wikipedia, that's it. All these guys on YouTube doing all these in-depth retrospectives, try to pretend like they have this abundance of knowledge and everything. You know, you can't ask the question they don't know the answer to. It's all fake. It's all lies. All they do is read you the Wikipedia article out loud on mic. That's it. So all these guys try to nitpick, like, oh, this trivia of what size shoes did Woody Allen wear in this scene, and, you know, how many times did the lighting mess up during the different takes when they were shooting this part, and you know, get the money and run. I'm like, no, just give it up. Your time is over. You missed your mark. Nobody cares anymore. And if you're like still one of those YouTube buffs who does in-depth film retrospectives and, you know, historical facts, I'm like, you're one iOS update away from being irrelevant. The moment you can ask your phone to read you the damn web page, that's it. Because that's all you are, a web reader. If people are too lazy to read up on something, they go on YouTube, try to find somebody who's going to make a video about it. The moment you can just ask your phone, tell me every single detail about this movie, that's it, you're done. So I ain't impressed, he ain't impressed, nobody's impressed, and nobody cares.
Guys, again, I want to thank the Woody Allen subreddit on Reddit. You guys are awesome. Thanks for letting us share your content. People on Twitter, YouTube, the other Facebook pages, Google+. You've got some great communities. There's always going to be bad apples or negative nannies or whatever you want to call them. That's fine, but I'm just letting it out there, guys. And we're not going to do this probably again unless something really critical happens or what have you. But anyway, just want to let that out there, guys. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Again, if you're on YouTube, if you stuck away all this long, you can check out the retrospective. You can see it on the screen. Link in the description for all the previous recordings. Simon, thank you for coming on and joining me through this whole retrospective right now into the future. Thank you.
Nah, you're welcome. And this is where it gets interesting. So, you know, this was just a warm-up. Stick around. It's only going to get better.
I'm really looking forward to the Woody Allen retrospective from this point forward. And I'll just tell you guys right now, because I know some of you guys asked, we do focus on the Woody Allen movies that he didn't direct as well. And the next one is one of those movies, the movie called The Front, which is about the Hollywood blacklist, which I am really looking forward to. Guys, we'll see you on the next video. Again, all this in the description, and we'll see you on the next one.
Have a good one.